If you were a former college athlete and eating still feels complicated for you, like it's something that you've been struggling with for reasons you can't explain, I want to talk through that today because there's a reason. And I think it's worth understanding before we get into what to actually do about it. A lot of the way we eat now is built up around the habits we use now around eating have been built up over a long period of time from parents, from coaches, from teammates, from body image stuff that started for some of us before we can even remember. By the time you got to college, you already had a whole relationship with food and not always a healthy one. And then sports ended, and no one talked about that change or why it happens when you're not training the same way you used to. So if eating feels like something you're struggling with, there's a reason. And we'll talk through why and also what to do about it. I'm Justin Andrade, the founder of the Athlete Reboot System. We've helped over 2,000 former college athletes get in the best shape of their lives in a sustainable way they can actually enjoy and learn how to do it for themselves. So let's get into it. First, we're going to talk about where the approach came from. Before we get into anything specific, I want to slow down a little bit in this part. This is the part that gets skipped over a lot. Most of us, as former college athletes, had food being managed and watched for over a decade. Weigh-ins, body comp tests, fitness checks, numbers shared in front of teammates, comments from a coach you can still quote 10 years later. Even if you've never told anybody you remember it, you probably do. And that's just in college. A lot of that happened when we were way younger than that. Parents who kept track of what was in the fridge, what meals we ate, how we prepared for practice, what they taught us about food. Coaches in high school who pulled people aside about weight or being in better shape or needing to focus more on their fitness. Teammates who compared bodies in the locker room. I personally was a swimmer, and so we were in swimsuits all the time. And so fitness was a big part of who I was, and body image was related to that. Diet talks with family and always being the fit one in the room because we were the athletes, and even sports such as swimming, gymnastics, dance, distance running, like all of those sports require you to be in great physical shape. And we tend to be tracked when we're doing that. Tests. I know when I was a college athlete, we did body fat tests and scale and all of this different stuff that I think we see the public side of it where we're just like performing at a high level. And that's a great thing. It's not to take anything away from that elite performance world. But it's just the fact that this is the reality of elite athletics where we are tracking everything we do, including our body fat, including our body image, including our stats of how we're actually performing every single day. And there were fitness checks at the beginning of the year, fitness checks in the middle of the season, fitness checks when we came back from vacation. It's a huge part of who we are and what we did from a young age. And this makes that number on the scale be part of like what we think we have to do to be able to be on that team and commit at that level. I remember even in high school, like I was underweight at the time and I was literally like getting calories like poured into me. And it was like constant, like, hey, eat this, eat this, eat this. And getting to college and being told like, hey, yeah, I got to be super fit, regardless of whether like the coach or environment did, like everything was tracked. And when I went into Division I athletics, like there were mandatory bod pod tests, and the dietitian kept track of everyone's body fat, and like there were conversations to be had, but we couldn't know specific. Like, it was this weird thing around fitness, and honestly, just like put even bigger of a highlight on that because the athletes even started being aware of it versus like if we're just talking performance wise, something that is a part of the picture, but it's not the only part of the picture, but something that became a huge focus from when we were kids. And for some of us, especially women, that pressure started when we were 11 or 12 years old and never really stopped. So by the time you got to college and a strength coach or dietitian was telling you what to eat before you lift, or a dietitian saying like, hey, here's what the meal plan looks like, or here's what you should eat, or here's what your macros should look like, or a teammate was making a comment in passing about somebody's weight, you weren't just building up this mentality around food from scratch. Like you were inside a system that was literally built for that. And you would come back and like you would kind of be judged by like, okay, well, like did they train during the off season? Did they not? And again, none of these things are meant to be said in a bad light where like that world isn't a good thing. I think the athletics world is incredible and does so much for so many people, but these are things that are dealt with after you transition away from athletics. And so it's important to talk about that. So when sports end, that team's gone, the coach is gone, that structure's gone, but the way that you think about food doesn't go anywhere. It literally just stays the way it is, but now you're not training 20 hours a week. So whatever you carry around with food mindset right now, like you didn't make it up. It got built into who you are, and nobody really sat you down and said the thing that was driving all of it has changed. The next 5 things we're going to walk through are not about you doing something wrong. They're about updating an approach that came from a life you don't live anymore. So we'll talk through specifics and tangible things that you can take away to help shift that mindset and understand like, okay, like this is what things actually need to look like now. So first, how much you actually eat. The first thing former athletes need to relearn is just how much they're eating. When you were competing, the amount of food you needed was a lot. That wasn't an indulgence. That was literally matching what your body was actually doing. Sometimes 20 hours a week of training, sometimes more. Like you needed the food, you weren't being excessive. You were eating to get through the week. But that amount of food doesn't get smaller just because the training got smaller. Your appetite was built over years of high output. Your body got used to being fed at that level. Your habits, 3 big meals, snacks in between, eating soon after every workout, like literally got hard coded into who we are. Then we stopped training like that. And for most of us, like we're not going to ever train that way again unless you're a professional athlete. So you went from 20 hours a week of training to maybe 3 or 4 hours a week. And the eating habits haven't really changed. And it's not something that's talked about. That's not a failure of discipline. It's not a failure of good habits. That's just what happens when one part of your life shifts and the rest doesn't catch up to it. Your appetite and your habits are still calibrated to a different version of you. And this version of you hasn't existed for a few years once you've been removed from the sport. And when you understand that, a lot of the shame around it or guilt you feel or stress you feel build up around food can ease up. It's not that you're eating too much, you're eating in a way that used to make complete sense to you your entire life. And the amount doesn't fit the life you're living now. And that's worth at least being honest about. But it's also a conversation around understanding that like that is not something to hold against you. It's just helping understand like how to rebuild that habit for a normal life. And I think a lot of people think when they talk about food and saying that you don't have the same output that you used to, that you're suddenly going to start being restrictive and cut all these things out. It's literally just recalibrating to like what works for life now and helping change some of those habits to what aligns to being a normal person. Because we were simply taught to feed and perform like an athlete. And this is an entirely different world we're living in now where we're working a 9 to 5 job. We want to have a social life. We want to go out and have pizza and maybe have a drink or two and enjoy our life and not feel like we have to feel guilty around those things. So it's good to know you don't need what you used to have, but we can still enjoy food, just understanding how to do that. And so once you just accept that the habits that you've always built around eating and making sure you're having enough and the snacking habits that you have, like that's okay. We accept it. We know what it is. We just have to adjust from there. So how do you snack? Because this is one of the hardest things I see is as athletes, like we had a team room, we had this environment where we were supposed to be snacking all the time. It's like get more calories in, make sure you're eating enough, make sure like you're fueling properly. And this mindset is talked about constantly in the athletic world. But then you go outside that world and you don't need those same habits anymore. Again, you're not to blame. We never want to put a stigma around food where any food is bad or a stigma where a specific diet's going to work. It's just learning the habits that are going to work for you in the way life looks now so that you can be happy, healthy, and confident for the next 30 years versus you having to stress about these things constantly. Because one thing we see a lot, especially when it comes to learning how to snack or adjust what you eat, is there's so much food pressure. Like there's pressure around what we eat and how we eat. And we're constantly doing like the math of what all that looks like versus just rebuilding that relationship to be a healthy relationship with food. So snacking is one of the things we see the most. And a lot of former athletes call themselves grazers, not necessarily by the term, but that's just like what they actually kind of end up being like because it's almost a part of your personality. Like I just like to snack. I'm always eating, but snacking often isn't like a personality trait. Like it got taught to you by people whose job it was to keep you performing at a high level. There was always another practice coming. There was always another lift coming. There was another training week coming. There's a recovery window after a morning session and a fueling window before the next one. And so you're always thinking about being prepared for the next training. How do I recover for the next day? Eating constantly made sense because there's always another thing that your body had to be prepared for. For some of us, that started as young as 5 years old, but by the time you become 22, eating every couple hours was just what we did. We didn't pick it up because we were hungry all the time. We picked it up because the schedule asked us to be constantly fueling. And now there's no second practice. Like there's no afternoon lift. There's no 4 o'clock hunger that our body needs, but we're trained to do that. And I'm the same way. Like snacking is one of my favorite things. And even when I was coaching, like I would go in the team room and there would be like bagels and there would be Cheez Its and there would be like cereal and there'd be oatmeal and there'd be just like, Cliff bars and like all this stuff for us to snack. And I was like, oh yeah, like, well, I got to fuel up. I got to recover. And so I would just grab something. It's a habit that was like literally built around that entire world. And because you're training so much, arguably above and beyond a healthy point, but it becomes about performance instead of about being healthy, you have to do that. Like food had to be convenient. They had to keep everything stocked to make sure you were going to recover because if you didn't actually eat the nutrition you need to, like there's a high probability you were going to get broken down, not recover, get sick, and be out of training or get injured. So the solution is to make sure you are fueled properly all the time. And so this is a habit that was built around that schedule that you literally don't have anymore. That's not something that you can just like tough through or think like, okay, well, I'm just going to go cold turkey and restrict and not eat and try something super strict or do all these approaches that probably don't set you up for success. It's something that kind of needs to be loosened up on its own once you actually notice and are aware of where it comes from. You don't need to fuel for the next thing because there isn't the next thing. And you're allowed to eat at meals, you're allowed to have snacks, you're allowed to feel satisfied, but you also don't have to constantly be snacking. And so it's one of the biggest adjustments we have to make is how do you not feel restricted, still enjoy food and still be able to embrace that habit of like liking food but also getting back on a regular schedule. And so snacking is one of the first things we work through and just restructuring a way where it is fueling you, but it's within alignment of what you actually have in terms of output and what your week actually looks like. In snacking, the mindset behind it shifts as well because it's not that snacking as itself is a bad thing. It's just snacking for what life looks like now. And so the snacks that we learned about in school or the snacks we learned about as athletes were very carb heavy. They were very fat heavy. Like they had some protein source, but that wasn't like the main driver. And there are things like gave us quick energy. That's like, oh, well, like you have a training session, like grab a bagel real quick or grab this quick fuel source. But like we're just going to go sit at a desk. And so like we do that same thing. We're not going to get the result from it. So what you actually need to be snacking on looks a little bit different. And honestly, like the biggest thing is snacking depends on what your life actually requires and what your schedule looks like. And so everyone's life is different. A good example of this is I work at my desk pretty much 9 to 5 every single day. And I get hungry around 11 a.m., but I know it's like not quite time for me to eat lunch. I usually eat lunch around 1. Well, if I was an athlete and I was planning, I'd probably have a very carb heavy meal planning for that afternoon practice. Instead, I have about 200 grams of Greek yogurt. I have 30 grams of granola, and like that's typically my snack. I'll throw some fruit in there and some honey in there to kind of give a little more flavor. But like that's kind of what that looks like. So a very protein heavy meal with some carbs and some fruits in it. So it's just shifting to what's best for your schedule. Or for example, we have a coach who she coaches Division 1 athletics, and she's always at these big conference competitions and weekend swim meets, and she may be so focused on the team where she may go like 6 hours without eating. Well, then we're really going to be prioritizing more like fats and nutrient dense and calorie dense things because the odds of her even getting a snack in is rare. Like we're building those snacks around that. Or if you work night shift, like you want to have consistent energy. And so we're looking at what that looks like specifically, but it has to be built through what your life actually looks like. And so no two people snacking is ever going to be truly the same. Now, next we're going to talk about like what you actually need after a workout. And the post workout meal is a real thing. Like when you're in season, eat within 30 minutes, have a recovery shake, get a real meal within an hour. Like none of that was made up. Your body was beat up from a 90-minute high output session. And another one was coming the next morning or the next afternoon. So that timing window really mattered. Most of us heard that advice for years from strength coaches, from dietitians, from trainers, from teammates passing it around. That like literally got drilled into us. So now as former athletes, like we're still doing that. We do a 30-minute lift and we think we have to do this like big meal and fuel plus a shake. And what that can lead to is us eating too much at one meal. And it becomes this big recovery meal, this big focus on making sure we're eating enough. And the reality is like that workout probably didn't take the same toll on us that a college workout did. So our trainings are typically shorter. They're typically less intense. They're rarely, if ever, back to back. And the recovery you need is probably going to scale down with it. So eating around your workouts can scale down as well. You're allowed to drink some water. You're allowed to have a snack. You're allowed to have a protein shake, but you also think of like how that factors into the day as a whole, because it's not like that's just allowing you to recover from that session. That's actually part of your daily input that you take in. And so those meals actually do count. And so understanding what you eat throughout the day and what you actually snack on, how that factors into your caloric intake is something that's worth being aware of and knowing that it's built in the right process for you. The next is more around a mindset shift that we see a lot, and that's food is never something that's earned. And this one's harder to talk about because for a lot of us, it's tied to guilt. A lot of former athletes operate on this idea that food is something that you earn. You trained hard, you you trained hard so you can eat. You skipped a workout so you should hold back at dinner. You had a bad week so you don't deserve a full plate. You had a good week. So you've earned the dessert, or you've earned the second helping, or you've earned the night out. And we've heard that from coaches. We've heard that from parents. We've been rewarded with good meals when we do well. There's even some coaches where like you excel and you get a better meal because of it. I remember there are multiple times where like we did well and like the meal we got was better because of it. And that ties how we perform to our ability to eat. And so we just fed into that relationship of an unhealthy style of eating versus the reality that like food's never earned. It's like literally fuel we need to live. And so almost nobody like reinvents that process after they graduate. And that approach of having that guilt came from somewhere. And it's not that those coaches or that process had any ill intent. It came from a coach. It came from a coach who their job was typically tied to your performance. And so it came from a culture that treated food as a reward a lot of time for output. It came from years of body comp meetings where you were told what to eat and how you looked, or your body fat numbers got linked to whether or not you were, doing well for the team. And if you didn't come back in the right shape, like it was something that got talked about. And so you felt guilty eating certain meals because you knew you had to get healthier. And like all of these things just pile into this just guilt around food. And so now you are 25 to 35 years old and it feels weird eating something that may not be the best for you on a rest day. But the reality is like there's no bad meal. Just understand how it fits in the greater scheme of things and doing it in a way where you can have moderation around knowing like I can enjoy this meal and get back on track tomorrow. But we see people all the time who come in and like they will skip breakfast on days they don't work out, or they will eat less because they don't feel like they've earned it. Or even when they realize they don't have to train the same way they used to, like we almost have to get them to eat more at times because they feel so guilty for eating anything when they're not training 20 hours a week. And so this old pattern is running underneath everything. And the reframe is this: in the life you have now, food is never a payment for movement. You eat because you're a human being with a body, rest days, off weeks, vacation, hard weeks, good meals, easy weeks. Like your body still needs food. There isn't a transaction underneath it anymore. You're allowed to eat on a day you didn't train, and you're allowed to enjoy food. You're allowed to go out and have pizza. You're allowed to have a burger. You're allowed to eat fried chicken. You're allowed to have a drink or two if you want it, even though honestly, like I feel like crap after I drink. So I really don't. The point is, it all is okay as long as it's set into a greater scheme of like, this is what things actually look like for me on a regular basis. Now, the one rule that I would say I tell everyone to live by is make your convenient meals healthy. Meaning the routine meals, the meals you're gonna eat all the time. For example, for me, like my snack and my lunch, it's always gonna be something I'm gonna do. Like I'm gonna do it every day no matter what. And I'm usually eating by myself at my desk because I have to like take those hours to work. So those meals are gonna be healthy. Now, when I'm out with my family and like we're going out to a pizza place or we're going out to a burger place, like I'm gonna eat whatever I want. I'm not gonna think twice about it. But the convenient, the routine things, I'm just going to have as a good source. And it's not so much about like the aesthetic side of it as I would like to not be lethargic in the afternoon. I would like to feel good after work. I would like to like be confident when I go to the beach. Like, those are all things that I just would like. And so I'm going to make sure that the way I design my easy meals are to do things well. So when I do have the chance to be free and just enjoy myself, like I don't have to think about it. That athlete eating was something that you did, not something that you are. And so a lot of former athletes hold on to the way that they used to eat as a part of who they are. Well, I eat clean most of the time. I eat like an athlete. It feels like an identity. And letting go of that can feel like letting go of being an athlete altogether, which after losing the sport, the team, the structure can feel like one too many things to lose. But the way you ate as a college athlete wasn't really something you chose. It was part of being a part of the team. The strength coach, the dietitian, like they all gave you the plan. Your scholarship depended on you performing. You ate the way you did because the situation asked for it, not because you sat down at 19 and decided that was who you are and that's the way you're going to eat the rest of your life. The situation isn't asking for it anymore. There's no team, there's no scholarship, no dietitian, no performance to protect. You can eat in a way that fits your actual life now, and that's going to allow you to actually enjoy your life and get what the results that you want from it. And the eating honestly wasn't what made you. Like you made you. The eating was just one of the things you did at the time because you had to. And now it's understanding how to build that for your life now. And transparently, this is one of the hardest subjects for me to talk about and provide advice around. Just generally, it's going to be put out into the world because everyone's life is different. Everyone's experience around food was different. Everyone's experience as an athlete was different. But the most important thing for you to know is regardless of how you feel about it and regardless of things that you've been through, like there's a right approach for you. And nothing that you're doing is wrong. It's just understanding what that right approach is. And I could hop on here and say like, hey, do this like macro plan or do this keto plan or do whatever plan specifically. But the reality is like your life is completely different. Your life probably doesn't look that way. Your life probably wouldn't do this, or maybe you wouldn't enjoy that, or that's going to make you feel restricted because you spent most of your life being restricted. The plan has to be built around you specifically. And so as you're scrolling through Instagram today and you see the specific diet or you see the specific meal or the different approach around nutrition, like none of those matter. Like shut the reel off, don't look at it, don't read it. You have to realize the best approach for you is unique to you and your life and everything you are going through specifically. And most importantly, if you struggle with that food pressure or you struggle with feeling restricted because you can't eat like you used to, like that's a normal thing that a lot of people are going through and it's not just you. And so it's okay to understand and admit that and be aware of that because I think it's one of those things that's never going to be talked about enough. And also, it's important to remember that like 99% of the people you get information from online have no idea anything about nutrition. Like I'm not an expert in nutrition. That's why we have a dietitian. That's why we have nutritionists. That's why we have people that are actually certified and have the background to understand how to do it really well and have worked with our team to do it the right way because there's so much crap out there. And this is a subject that personally frustrates me because we have people come to us all the time that tried another program and their approach was so restrictive that they cannot do it. Versus like, okay, like meet someone where they're at, see what their life looks like and build the approach to that. So those are the five most important lessons around eating for you right now, based on what I know about you, which is very little. But look at how much you eat, look at how you snack, look at where you are actually training and what your life actually looks like, and build that to that. Don't build it off of a template someone else provided for you. Don't build it off of a template of what you think you see on Instagram that should be the right approach for you. Look at your life, look at what your needs are, what you like to eat, what flexibility you would like to have, and build the plan to that. And the idea around that eating is earned, and the idea that athlete eating is a part of who you are. Like the one thing I want you to walk away with from this, more specific than any change, none of this is your fault. You learned to eat a certain way because of what you were doing at the time as an athlete. People taught you, high performance programs reinforced it. Whole years of your life were spent inside that system that made all kinds of sense when you were doing it and it worked. It got you to where you needed to go in sport. But then that sport ended and nobody really talked about how you should actually transition away from that to what life is going to look like for you now. So you just keep doing it and you probably try to make some adjustments on your own and that can be difficult. And that's what happens when nobody tells you this side of the conversation when it ends because you finish that last game, you finish that last competition and you've been based up for performance, even fueling till that last very second. Then you finish your program, you finish your competition, you finish your swim meet, whatever it is, and it's just like, okay, now I'm a normal person and no one talks about that part of it because we've been so focused on performance. So you're allowed to understand what works best for you now. It's okay to humble yourself or have a little bit less of an ego and say, like, this is something that I actually need support around to figure it out now. Because the last thing you should do is spend the next 5, 10, 15 years trying to figure it out when you can spend the next 5, 10, 15 years feeling your best, having energy, being happy, being confident, knowing you're going to be around for your grandkids in the future because those are the most important things for you, not just what you can do for 3 months. The most important decisions you can make around your health are the things that are going to last for the next 30, 40, 50 years. So I hope this helps. I hope this allows you to let go of some of the pressure that comes with all of the world of athletic performance that we've been surrounded in our entire life. And as always, if you enjoyed it, please share with a former teammate. This is a subject I am incredibly passionate about and makes a big difference to me because I was someone that struggled with eating for a long time and thought I needed to fuel a certain level. And then I got super restricted and I ate boring meals and like wouldn't eat out with family and did all the stuff that I'm not necessarily like proud of the way I went about it at the time, but I didn't know any better. And the thing for you to know and for you to take away is there is a way for you to be healthy. There's is a way for you to be happy and a way for you to be confident and still be able to enjoy food because I think a lot of us believe that we either have to train like an athlete for the rest of our life or we have to do something super restrictive. And you can have both of those worlds in a way that's actually going to be something you can enjoy for the next 30 years. So, like I said, if you enjoyed this, please share with a former teammate and I'll see you on the next episode.